Clint.
Colette.
Oh, I have to get the live stream button out of the way. I don't want to live stream this. Riverside, I need a second. We need a second.
Maybe we should start doing that. Yeah, maybe
we could. We could. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this one though. Please no. This
Add
is an
more
experiment.
height to the High Wire Act. That is already so impressive.
How are you doing? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. I am. I think right before we started recording, I was like, I'm a little out of sorts. Like
discombobulated.
It's like some effects stacking. Like until moments before you hit record, I couldn't find my glasses, which they are not for seeing things far at all. They are for reading. Like I have very bad farsightedness. So it makes me tired when I don't have them. And I didn't have them all morning while I was perusing the paper we're about to talk to refresh my memory. So that tired me out. I didn't sleep well. I just went to the gym. I forgot to eat before the gym. So it's just like, it's like the balls, it's like I can.
You're just having a haphazard day.
Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, wait, no, I can't. I can do 3.
Could it be that you're going solid? No, sorry. All right. I'm skipping ahead. I'm skipping ahead
a little bit. Yeah. Don't skip ahead there, but there is some truth to that. Yeah. How are you?
I am okay. We had 10 pallets of cabinetry and unconstructed cabinetry as well as closets pieces delivered to the house this morning. Also a dining room table. Also a piece of our HVAC equipment arrived in a case. So it's like just totally insane. Lots of things happening and no point in sight where we think that those are installable. Like we literally do not know when all of that will go in. And so now it is just sitting around. Anyways, and there's a siren. I don't know if you can hear it, but
I can.
So
I'm sure it's not for your stuff on your pallets are not on fire. I'm sure they're fine. And
we haven't had an episode in a little bit. Like we did our New Year's episode with John, but we haven't. We have some recordings scheduled soon, which I'm excited about, but I'm excited to get back. I've also been working with the foundation board, the Resiliency Software Foundation board on like setting goals for this year. And like a lot of that is really exciting to me. So all of that has been on my mind. I've been having a lot of like, I'm like, there are no jobs for me to apply to right now. There's just like, don't seem to exist right now. So I'm just like having a go at like running a nonprofit foundation for no money, doing the free stuff.
I mean, everyone should do it at least once.
I agree.
Totally, like take that survival instinct off the table for a while. See how it goes if you can.
Yeah,
it's impressive that you're holding it down.
Yeah, well, I also feel like the state of the world has caused me to go down. I had like the day after Renee Good was killed, I had a day of like I can't actually do anything. I can't focus on anything today, and I'm freaking out, and I feel like I'm trying to slowly climb out of that and try to plug myself into communities and connection with people and in different contexts and see if that will help. Because right now I'm also kind of terrified. So
I've been like, I'll go to a protest here or there, made my political voice heard, but I have now started to want to become an activist for real. Like, and I've noticed a bunch of my other friends who are kind of like me, like suburban dads who just have been angry and voting and donating, but now we're like, no, I think we actually have to get out in the streets now. Like,
yeah, now is the time to organize like via Signal chat and
right. So it feels like a different tone in our lives outside of our little digital world here. Definitely a weight hanging on, but I actually think also things like the Resilience and Software Foundation are nice distractions from that. Like,
Yeah. Well, it's a
like you're
kind of
doing some good work
community.
for some
Right.
people.
Right. It's a kind of community. I think community of all different kinds really helps right now. And being able to provide people with something that they are hungry for, whether that's learning, whether that, I mean, uh, gonna sound like the absolutely leftist activist that I am now, but probably my go-to model for how to do some like for really effective kind of community organizing is the Black Panthers. And if you study anything about the Black Panthers, like a lot of people know the Black Panthers as like the guys who had guns and whatever. And yes, they did have that, but there were some pretty logical reasons for them to have that element. But the vast majority of the Black Panther membership and their activities were around feeding children, educating people, and providing community spaces for people who were ostensibly being left behind by um, their broader governments. And I was listening to a podcast with Tressie McMillan Cottom like a month ago, I think. She was on this podcast that these guys in North Carolina do called the Holler something Holler Hometown Holler, and I'll link to it in the show notes. But she was taught like they were talking about like why were the Black Panthers so threatening to like this, and it was because like they started to act like a state. Like there's like a lot
Hmm.
of very interesting philosophy here about like, and I think like it is extremely revolutionary to become embedded in your communities in a way that like transcends like what's going on. And even as I hold that value, I also like wish for a, you know, beautiful social democracy that has healthcare for people and make sure that children don't go hungry. So, uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
same. By the way, and I think we can turn this one back on in a second, but I really do think we should talk about it. It's just we have a platform. We're talking to a few
Yeah.
people, and I just want to agree with you, and also say it's something to hope for that, and it's another thing to actually work for that, and that's what I'm
Yeah.
feeling now. Is like I
Absolutely.
really have been for the all this time. It's been crazy and wacky and like different than anything in our lives before. I've been hoping it's the pendulum swinging all the way to the apex, and then it keeps going, and I'm just like, I guess we're not at the apex yet. It's still going right. Like it's still going right. At some point we do have to jump on the pendulum and get it to swing back, like right. And that's kind of what I feel like is the work that we all need to start doing. So really appreciate anything you're doing to build community is part of that and build and bring peace into our lives because that's what
Yeah.
people need more than anything right
Well,
now. It's just
community
safety and
allows
peace.
us, yeah, community allows us to see ourselves like each other as humans again that are valuable. And I think I firmly believe, to quote Ruth Wilson Gilmore, another person who I read a lot of and value a lot of her thought, where life is valuable, where life is precious, like life is precious, right? And I think that is the world that I want to propagate, and that where connection and community is valuable, connection and community is valuable. People matter. Where we recognize our humanity, that becomes that has all of these ripple effects out. So that's my only suggestion right now, everybody. I don't know if that's too
Yeah,
philosophical, not concrete enough, but that's what I'm trying to do. Also, get in those
I
signal
think it's
chats and fucking
yeah.
follow ICE around and videotape, and don't be afraid, and um, you know, protect people. That's what I will also say. Do all of that stuff because it matters. It matters. Um, cool. Speaking of community, we got a question from our community that prompted this week's episode.
Thank you,
Um,
community.
thank you, community. Yeah, a question came in that was definitely from somebody we know. I heard someone in a lean coffee format talking about going solid, and I didn't get it. something about 3 Mile Island, and then something about intensive care units. It just didn't make any sense. What are they even talking about? And this is like, so Clint, I may have mentioned on the podcast many times before that Going Solid is one of my favorite papers. As a total fucking safety nerd, we're entering into safety nerd land.
It is one of the high holy papers of safety nerdism, I think.
Yeah, and we have historically shied away from like really focusing in on papers because we wanted to be a podcast that was like practical. But but I don't think that those are in conflict, actually. So I think we could try. This is our attempt. That's why we're not live streaming. We're going to try to talk about this paper, this academic thing, but also I would love to also try to bring in some concrete discussion about how it applies to software or how we think it might apply to software in our worlds. I would love to also throw that out to our audience. If you have thoughts about if this makes your brain start turning on things you've experienced at work or whatever, we would love to hear from you about that. Clint, have you read Going Solid?
Yeah, I read it pretty early on in the journey. I think it was maybe in ACL's list of like, these are good things to read. I also just, Dr. Cook was one of our instructors, and I was like, who's Dr. Cook? And Dr. Cook is in that paper. So I read it to 2020, probably 2020 for the first time.
Okay.
I think I've read it about 7 times since then.
Oh my God, it's so good, right?
Yeah.
It's
really,
short.
It's 5 pages.
It is. Yeah.
Right?
It's really
it's
digestible. Yeah. It's right here. And we're going to do a sharing my screen thing. So, but I was wondering, what is your summary of Going Solid? Like, or what is your main takeaway?
Well, I think this is funny. This is related to our last episode. I went back and listened to like our first few episodes just to kind of do a review, and you brought up the pit in the first episode, and you were like watching
second season's out now, by the way.
I finally watched episode 1 2 weeks ago. So I listened to that. I'm like, oh yeah, I was supposed to watch the pit, and I watched it, and I immediately clicked into Going Solid. I was like, yeah, because what do they talk about in that first episode? I don't know if you remember.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about how the ER is the bed buffer for the rest of the hospital.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that they're asking, like, why are you running inefficiently here down in the ER? They're just asking about money. They're spending too much money.
Yeah.
Right. And he's like, I wouldn't have to if you people would take my patients that I've admitted. Right. And I was like, did this person, whoever wrote this, has
read the paper?
I would love to find out if they did, because so that related to like a little bit of like culture, but I've ever since reading it and seeing that little diagram, which the diagram is pretty critical and it's tough. We're in mostly audio listeners, I know, but if you can go get the paper, it's a very simple diagram. That operating point with these boundaries. Yeah. Like that immediately made sense to me when I read it. Yeah. I was like, oh, I deal with this all the time. You can't know until it falls off the cliff that you're going to fall off the cliff. So you keep way away from where the cliffs
you're
are.
The coyote. You are like out in the air before you know.
Yeah, that's when you fall. Yeah.
So I think the first thing for folks who are not familiar with this is I think it's important to talk about what Going Solid means. So we'll start at the beginning. Going Solid is a paper. It's the full title is Going Solid, a model of system dynamics and consequences for patient safety. And it's by Richard Cook and Jens Rasmussen. Dr. Richard Cook, pretty sure Jens Rasmussen is also a doctor. Jens Rasmussen being the kind of the grandfather of the safety, like the more recent modern safety movement is descends from Jens. Jens being, of course, if you haven't heard this podcast, Jens was a huge nuclear safety sort of person, thinker, but also extrapolated from that to kind of do this very large philosophical safety work. So that sort of transcended just nuclear safety, but he worked in nuclear power plants. That's his kind of background. Dr. Cook, anesthesiologist. So, and that formulates their backgrounds, formulate the making of this paper. So going solid is a nuclear power slang term. I'm quoting from the paper here, that is used to describe a difficult to manage technical situation. And essentially, manageable behavior of a steam boiler in a nuclear reactor counts on there being both steam and liquid water present in a boiler. When a boiler becomes completely filled with liquid, that is called going solid. Its operating characteristics shift suddenly and dramatically. And the resulting situation is both hazardous and difficult for operators to control. And that is a very important sort of set of characteristics. So that is what going solid is in the nuclear world. And they propose in this paper that going solid in hospitals creates problems that are similar. So in many respects to those that accompany going solid in nuclear power plants, in particular, going solid in hospitals creates a series of critical relationships tightly coupling the units of the hospital together so that events in one place have direct implications for the operations of all the others. So this is about, they use the term coupling here in a way that is used, that was first used by Charles Perrault in Normal Accidents, which is, he's describing complexity as sort of two different things, complexity and coupling, right? So coupling is this idea that it's like if you imagine gears moving, like coupling is like this gear moves, so this gear has to move. Like they're just totally interlinked in a way that is inescapable.
They're directly coupled, yeah.
Right? Yeah. So
but then that third gear is indirectly coupled, but is also part of the same system.
Yeah, and I think like so our software engineers, especially software engineers that are deeply versed in microservices architectures, know that a singular principle that is often sort of espoused by folks who are very important architects of these systems say, do not couple your microservice, right? The whole point of microservices architecture is to decouple as much as possible in the system to help manage that failure. And I think that that's a really interesting thing for us to keep in the back of our minds as we think about how this relates. Do you?
Yeah, they'll yeah. Well, you'll hear the term the distributed monolith. Right? You do not want to create a distributed monolith. Like the anti-pattern, when you've reached the point where you're like, we should peel some of these functions out of the monolith and make microservices, and you'll recognize in people who've been through the distributed monolith anti-pattern the recoiling in horror at mention of microservices. When I have actually never been through it, so I want to call that out. Like I've definitely been at places that have taken a monolith and broken it up, and I've been there at various phases, but never have I experienced directly this distributed monolith pattern. I have been at a place that did it and then walked it all back and just went back to the monolith because it was so painful. And the reason is this coupling. Yeah. This idea that you had a thing that was at least contained and you understood that it's all together and it's all coupled because it's designed that way. It's a monolith. And then you said, no, we're going to decouple it, but you didn't. You didn't take the time to actually think about like, well, if this one's not operating, how do we just degrade this one rather than it just stops too?
Have it all fall apart. Yeah.
The idea that instead of having gears, we're going to have chutes and conveyors and things that have some buffer between them, or we're going to have like shutoff switches that say, well, when this part of the system isn't working, then this part of this system just has to go slower. Or this sort
or
of
it can wait.
Or this sort of system actually just doesn't go forward, but all the rest of the functions go forward.
Right.
That's what a truly decoupled system does. So yeah, I definitely think in our world, people, especially if you don't have someone who's experienced enough to know about the distributed monolith, it's so easy to just walk right into the trap, essentially.
Yeah. So So I think, like, before we move on, like, the interesting thing about this paper to me from, like, when I was learning about it and reading it for the first time, and also how it related in my safety literature education, is it takes Jens Rasmussen's boundary model, which we've talked a little bit on this show about already, and it takes it, it presents it, it does a really great job of kind of like briefly summarizing it, and then it expands on it to specifically talk about the mechanisms behind a system going solid within that boundary model. Um, and and so I think that's probably the thing that makes the most sense to talk about next. I was gonna share my screen. Hold on.
Share your screen.
I was gonna share. Uh, allow, going solid, share. All right. So hopefully you can see. Oh, it's just moved over. Okay. So this is my endorsement of Paper Pile, where I keep all my papers organized. It is a it's the only way I understand how to access all of my academic papers that I have collected over time. So I think this is like it says modified from Rasmussen here, but I think this is a pretty good simple version of the diagram. So like Rasmussen posits this is the sort of generic safety world diagram, which is that there's three boundaries. There's the acceptable performance boundary, there's the economic failure boundary, and there's the unacceptable workload boundary. And that there's this point, this operating point that constantly is moving around within those boundaries. And they each kind of aspect pushes against the other. And so, this whole management pressure line here is, hey, we want to save some money. We want to give dividends to our shareholders. I don't know what, right? Like they just want to be more economically efficient. And, or like they're in the pit, this episode where they're saying, hey, you have too many free beds. So you push against, when it pushes usually against the acceptable performance boundary, which some people would call this like the safety boundary, or the like, this is where stuff goes bad, and when you cross it, you're in a
There's
bad
harm.
place, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And an unacceptable workload boundary is more like, at some point people will work so hard that they will fall apart on the job. Like they will fall asleep, or they will crash out, or they will burn out, or they will be unable to function. And
Yeah.
so this is
Overload.
like,
Right.
right. And the idea is that as people are pushed by management pressure for efficiency, but also like they're going to want to do, this is like the MO of every DevOps person that I've ever met, which is like, how can I do the least amount and still, be effective at my job, which is what can I automate? How can I push? And so they're going to want to do
Toil.
as
Right.
little as, they're going to want to do as little as possible, but also push away from this idea of working a 60-hour week or an 80-hour week or something like that. So there is some like place at which you could cross, and you just wouldn't have any more people to do the work.
Well, I want to push back
pushing against
on your framing, there, because I don't think that's the DevOps person wants to do as little as possible. I know it feels like that. I think as the DevOps person in the podcast, right? What I think is what starts to happen is you start to wonder if anything you do matters, and people do need that purpose to be served a little bit. Like they need to feel like I am a cog in the machine, like that connects somewhere to the part that makes us economically viable, makes the
Yes.
customers safe, right?
Uh-huh.
And what this unacceptable, I kind of like that word in this diagram, because you start, like, if you are that DevOps person who is just like, make manual change, push manual change, make manual change, push manual change, right? That toil word, it starts to degrade your ability to actually spot when your adaptive capacity is in need.
I agree with that.
Just it's like
I'm
the arm just does this automatically after a while, and it actually starts to compromise and push against the other boundaries. Like it kind of
right. And
bounces off of this one.
to be clear, when I say the laziest, I think like the jokes
We should be
that
lazy,
I have
by the
heard.
way.
Well, the jokes that I have heard from people are that they like this is like back in the day, right? These are very old jokes, or like I only got good at puppet because I wanted to have nothing to do at my job, or like something like that. It's fine. It's
Yeah.
fine. I understand. But there is a sense of like also what I normally see, and we could talk about this in another podcast, is like people automate a bunch, but then they always find other things to do. They always find more complexity
demand,
to add to
maybe?
their lives, right?
Yes, agreed.
And so I will argue that the laziness is short lived because it becomes more work.
Agreed.
So this acceptable performance boundary has a couple of extra things on it. So they put here that there's this marginal boundary. That's this like dotted line, and then there's like an error margin. And also the thing that pushes against these other two things would be, they would say, like counter gradient from campaigns for safety. So the idea that, we're pushing for more safety and therefore we're pushing against these other two kind of elements. The marginal boundary, and I think, well, maybe the marginal boundary is more known. Certainly this acceptable performance boundary is unknown until you cross it. So that's that Wile E. Coyote. We've run off the cliff, but we're still running. We don't really realize
the dotted line is a
done.
choice, actually.
Yeah.
We choose
you might have
it,
an
and
idea.
we try to measure of it. Like we can't measure the actual cliff, right? But we can when we talk about this all the time, and like we need some kind of a proxy metric that at least lets us know when we're headed toward the cliff, right?
Right.
And that's where we choose. Okay, I mean, MTTR comes a lot, right? As one of these, maybe this would be the thing, right? And so you're right. Like, it's not really known,
error budgets,
but it's chosen.
Right. Error budgets are an example of that. Yeah. And I think like the thing is here is like that I love this phrase from Dr. Cook, and he does this in the velocity talk where he introduces this in a talk format, which I'll also include in the notes. But people are always flirting with that marginal boundary. They're flirting and they're pushing past it. And he compares it to like a toddler who's told, like, now you can't come into the kitchen, and they sort of slowly sidle their toe over it, right? And I think he talks about daily operations being flirting with the boundary and pushing against it. And they also, so I'll move down to this one, right? Because this is talking about the difference between high reliability organizations and unstable systems, right? So stable high risk systems operate near the margin, but with tight control of the operating point. Unstable systems operate near the margin. The operating point will move over a wider area. Margin and acceptable performance boundary crossing would be more common. So here you see that point coming across this boundary more frequently, whereas like high reliability organizations tend to operate in this little stable, low risk systems stay always far from the boundary of acceptable performance. So, if you operate in one of those, congratulations. You probably aren't a software engineer.
Living the dream.
So I'm going to stop sharing this right now. I wanted to, there's another point at which we'll talk through how this paper makes us think about this differently, but I don't know that it's time for that yet. Sorry, I have like a few notes, Clint, so I just want to like take us through. So the boundary model, what is so we talked about SLOs as being kind of like that margin, like trying to keep us before that margin of error. Is there anything else is it like testing suites that we bypass sometimes, or
code freezes, right? Like our pressure, we're trying to move
velocity.
Yeah. And that's those controls that I think they're talking about there. I like the way they presented in the graph. If you're not watching a video, like that operating point cloud that they're showing, where That's more like how I think about it too. Is it's sort of like electrons. They're not really ever any place, right?
Yeah.
They're in all these places, and the more energy in that system, the more chaos in that system, the more likely it is that at the point of change, you're over the line and you've caused an incident or something. So, like, yeah, examples of things that we do to define that safety boundary. SLO is a good one. SLAs and SLOs to me are very much present in this boundary model,
Mm.
because to me, an SLA is you communicating to someone who's depending on your system, hey, we'll put ourselves closer to the economic failure boundary if we
Yeah.
cross the acceptable performance boundary for you. So that's
Yeah.
us giving ourselves incentive. We're
To pull
pushing, we're
back.
making sure
Yeah.
business up at the top levels, they can relate to that. Like,
Yeah.
they're mostly concerned about that
Yeah.
economic failure boundary. We talked about it before, like with executives joining incidents and things. Like, the SLA gives them like common language between the customers and the engineers to say, like, we're close to the SLA. We're
Yeah.
going to have a credit, or how many credits are we going to have, or how big of a credit is
Yeah.
this going to be, is easier. But the engineers need to not be involved in that, right? Because they're trying to do more with less. So SLOs give you a way to like say, well, let's draw a dotted line way away from the customers
from the
calling us,
SLA. Yeah.
and try to stay as close as we can to it, right? And when we go over it, it'll just be a conversation we have with ourselves. We'll go, why did we go over that line we chose?
Yeah.
Should we work on the system? Should we add controls to shrink the cloud? So this boundary model always makes sense to me for software and complex systems. It's present in everything we're doing. I think it's very relatable.
Yeah. And I see this talked about a lot too in official language, right? I remember seeing a vendor say, hey, this is our official SLA for you. But just so you know, internally, we try to adhere to an extra 9 on that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like how we hold ourselves accountable. And like describing that as sort of that safety, it's like pushing, it's like describing their margin and saying, hey, the acceptable one out here. There's also, though, this like, you don't know. You don't know. You don't know. It can seem like you are there. And I think that is the interesting part about going solid is it describes to me the nature of the system and how it starts to sort of go solid. They have a really good example of, and a really good description from a hospital's perspective that I kind of wanted to read next, which is a surgical procedure. So this is the very beginning of the paper. They describe the scenario. A surgical procedure was canceled after induction of anesthesia because a scheduled transfer of another patient out of the ICU was made impossible by deterioration of that patient's condition. So we have this situation where somebody is in the ICU. They were supposed to be transferred out of the ICU, but they still weren't doing very well. And so they had to stay in the bed, and there was no extra beds. But this anesthetic was started because it had become routine. So there was this regular way of operating. Sorry, you don't need to see my Anna and Elsa cutouts that my daughter put up on my wall. The anesthetic was started because it had become routine to begin surgery in anticipation of resources becoming available rather than waiting for them to be available. And that's the nature of the loose coupling that is usual in hospitals, right? There is extra beds. Because there are these extra beds, they want to get as many surgeries done as possible to make that money. They start to preempt and, sort of get ahead of themselves in order to, it's interesting. My son is going to go in for a tonsillectomy, and the nurse told me, yeah, they set it up in the OR, and there's like 2 days a week where there'll be an ENT that does like 30 tonsillectomies.
I believe
and I'm like, holy moly. They just like in and out,
Yeah.
in and out, in and out. And it's just like, that's how they operate. So the patient who had gotten this anesthetic early would have required an ICU bed for recovery after the procedure, and the practitioners elected to halt the operation when it became apparent that no ICU bed would be available. So this is bad. I mean, aside from the fact that, like, how would you feel if you were a patient and you gotten put under, and it also opens up the ability for something to go wrong with you. Like, anesthesia is one of the most risky parts of a surgery. And so anytime you're put under anesthesia, you're undergoing a great deal of risk regardless. If something happens to that patient when they're under anesthesia and there's no ICU bed to treat them for that problem, they've already kind of gotten themselves into a very dangerous scenario, right?
And they're
Even,
probably in need, right? So they
yeah.
probably are always they're also a little broken in some way, probably.
So, and this is like, this is sort of the introductory scenario that they're describing as being indicative of going solid, right? And they talk a little bit more about coupling, this tight coupling that happens, and how it can lead to more accidents. There's a quote that I had underlined that says, "Going solid creates new work for practitioners and managers and new opportunities for failure." And I think that's, you start to open yourself up to a lot more things going sort of catastrophically wrong when you're at that point, right? How does this
I have a
resonate for you as an operator?
big time. I have a practical recent example
Oh,
where I felt this happening. So we had this application, very high load, lots and lots and lots of app servers running, big database behind it, lots of load balancers, right? Sort of your typical SaaS product. And for years, it was understood that the load balancing algorithm available to this, just due to the choices that were made early on in the infrastructure, the load balancing algorithm choices were less than ideal. They were essentially using round robin, but the latency spread, this is getting pretty deep but I think it'll hang here. The variation in latency of this thing goes from like 30 milliseconds to 5 seconds. And they're all high volume requests, and they're all going through one set of app servers for the sake of keeping things simple. Like, the idea was just have one pool, get everything through there, and just, they're cheap. Let's run too many of them.
Yeah.
That's a very like sane and cogent.
We'll just scale that shit, man. We'll press the scale button.
And then we set out on a journey. Let's find a better load balancing algorithm. And that turns out to be fairly difficult. And it becomes a multi-year project for reasons that I won't get into. But essentially, replacing that edge layer load balancing algorithm, you might think, oh, that's just like change a config file. That there were reasons why that was going to be like a year. The optimistic version was a year. So, but it was just left in place this way. We just had too many app servers. Well, then you have this big database server behind it, and it has basically a hard limit on the number of database connections it can have. Like, it's just baked in. You have to reboot it to change it. You have to change memory thresholds. That could cascade through to other effects, right? So we set this safety boundary. We're like, we never want to go above 80%. Right? And we're relying on the fact that as we approach this over the years, like, we're bumping up. Well, the load balancing algorithm is coming. What happens? We get to the point where we're actually like, we do a thing and we're like 79%, and people start getting alerted when it twitches up over 80%. And the people who set that boundary are like gone. And they go, well, it's okay though. I see right here in this comment, the new load balancing algorithm will fix this. Let's go check on that project. Oh, that project? We hit some real big problems with that. It's going to take another year. We're stuck. Like, the database server, that changing that is a big deal. The app servers, we can't add more now. So if we get more customers, if we get more traffic, we're up a creek. We now have to go into adaptive mode and figure out. And we figured out, like, pull some low latency, high volume requests into their own pool. They can use less database
Mm.
connections because they churn through them faster. And then, like, actually, some of these are just terrible. Let's make them faster. Like, but that had to all be done in like 2 weeks because you could see the forecast curve. We were about to go over the cliff. Very clear example where this whole system was unknowingly built on this load balancing algorithm changing, and that was happening in an entirely different side of the business,
Hmm.
as it often is. You've got, like,
Yeah.
focused on this one SaaS product, focused on everybody's load balancers,
Right. Right.
and those priorities are hard to get right. So that felt very much like this, where we were counting on that bed being available, and we
Yeah.
started and we made choices that
Yeah.
were very hard to reverse, and
Yeah.
then we got stuck.
Yeah. I'm going to share again because I think this is a really wonderful way to start to share going solid again. But this now is this
Oh, I
is
love this
I
diagram.
think the diagram that is the summary of the paper, or the point, like the thrust of the paper, right? So again, now we're zoomed in now to that margin and that safety boundary. And they're describing the process of going solid and how it happens. And so they're showing this operational point over around the margin, and they're saying the margin boundary. They're saying usual operations take place near the margin with small variations that flirt with the boundary, right? And transition to tight coupling begins with operating point at the margin, I think is the point. Transition to tight coupling begins with operating point. It's missing an at the margin. And transition to tight coupling makes possible large, rapid, unintended movements of the operating point. And that's kind of what you just described, I think, Clint, is like you all believed that you were over here at the margin when you were at 79%. But really, clicking over to 80% pushes you against this, right? Much harder and much faster than was intended. So if the margin is close to unacceptable performance boundary, large movements of operating point may generate accidents. So, and I think this is an interesting thing of, like, suddenly the description of that anesthesia situation was a description of maybe a near miss, or maybe nothing bad happened. I don't know if you can sue a hospital in the United States for putting you under anesthesia and then not giving you a procedure, but if something goes wrong, you might
I'm going to be happy about it.
And so it might not be, you might not be over that acceptable boundary, but suddenly you are in a category, in an echelon where all kinds of bad things that can happen that absolutely were not anticipated by this, like, tiny little creep beforehand, right?
And that no one's dealt with.
Right.
That
are new.
Like, you have a person
in
a different phase of surgery waking up. Or do we go to recovery room? There's a whole bunch of choices that have to be made that aren't the norm, right? They're not normative.
Right. Looser coupling.
More risk.
Yeah. So you have these movements back and forth where you're starting to jump, and you are having these events where you're like, whoa, we are way closer to disaster here. Looser coupling accompanies return to normal operations. And so I can describe a little bit. There's like a little bit of a blurb box in here where they say, they describe the event again. Near the end of a routine scheduled surgical procedure on patient A, the circulating nurse called the recovery room in anticipation of bringing the patient to it. The recovery room placed the transfer from the operating room on hold because all the recovery room locations were filled by patients. Among these was patient B, who should have been transferred from the operating room directly to an intensive care unit bed. Patient B was in the recovery room because there was no ICU bed available. So we have this, like, backup chain, right? Investigation of the circumstances revealed that the ICU bed was occupied by patient C, whose condition would allow transfer to the regular ward, but the regular ward bed was occupied by patient D, who was ready for discharge but was awaiting arrival of a family member to transport him to his home. Bed occupancy within the hospital had been at saturation for both ICU and regular ward beds for several weeks. Several weeks it was happening, right? This is just the event. Somebody's family being late to pick them up, right? In a normal hospital ward setting. So not the ICU, not the like just one person's people getting stuck in traffic or something causes this disaster to happen.
A thing that happens at a certain rate. That's that's a thing that happens at a certain rate that probably is pretty consistent.
Yeah. The high occupancy situation was managed by nurses and administrators by pairing new post-operative admissions with anticipated patient discharges. So basically, one out, one in, one out, one in.
Yeah.
Like everything stops, one out, one in. So they had been managing that for weeks at that point. Senior hospital management became involved in moment-to-moment decision-making about bed allocation, surgical procedure starts, and intra-hospital patient transfers. Managers also sought increased efficiency of resource use, mainly through direct inquiries about patient status. A new administrative nursing position was established to centralize and rationalize bed resources. The system remained solid for approximately 5 weeks.
Yep.
And I think that is like, I wanted to get to that end part. I needed to describe the situation to get to everybody, but that end part of like the system remained solid for 5 weeks. So going solid isn't this like, boom, everything is destructed, like we have this catastrophe. That going solid is like we are operating in this place where really fucking bad shit could happen at any moment, and we are continuing to do so, and we are doing so by, you know, they listed the ways by having a new position that was just devoted to rationalizing and sort of moving through this, you know, situation.
Yeah. I mean, that very similar to the situation I described. We did actually get the load balancing project re-accelerated. And we really didn't ever get out of the situation fully until they actually did push out the new load balancing, and it solved everything. It was just, the system became unsolid again, and we got our safety margins back. But until then, we were like I described, we were making little improvements. We had to focus on that. We had to put down other work. And focus on that, which then that has a chain of events effect, because everything that my team does is to make the system more reliable. So it's like now those things that we're also approaching safety margins are getting closer. So the system did remain solid for weeks. I think that has happened on multiple occasions.
Did any of this get operated as an incident? Can I ask?
Yes.
Okay.
Because we have a culture of like, well, I got alerted and I don't know what to do about it. That's an incident. So that's the culture that we've promoted, and it did work out. It was a zero impact incident. Like no customer was ever harmed.
Yeah.
And so we operate it in our world, that's a SEV 4. If there was a potential for customer harm, we would upgrade it. But SEV 4s kind of work nice in our culture too, in that like the flag doesn't go up too high. You know, like people see that and they're like, oh, that's another SEV 4.
You don't have VPs popping into your call?
No, not at all. Like,
so was all of that work though that was happened as a result, was that run through the SEV 4, or was it like adjacent, like they were run at different? Okay, so the SEV 4 was about monitoring the impact on customers, like monitoring production. Okay,
it was about crossing that margin actually. So we start with someone on call gets paged because the margin's getting crossed, but it's going like this. It's going up and down and up because it's what happens is on deploy, we have a few extra app servers.
Yeah.
And so just during deploys, during business hours, we were seeing it go up for a few minutes, and they'd get paged and they'd be like, what is, I've never gotten this monitor before because it's a really weird monitor. And they're like, why does this matter? And they go read the thing and it's old. And then they reach out and they're like, anybody know what to do? And I'm like, incident, incident, incident. And we get into an incident. That way we get people on call. Senior people start to
Yeah.
actually jump in on incidents like you expect in business hours. And then
Yeah.
people are like, oh yeah, look, here's this. And then somebody pulls out this document that like my predecessor wrote 2 years before I arrived that said, when we get to this load balancing algorithm, this will all go away. And that's how we figured out. But once we actually understood, oh, we can't move the margin. Like we actually can't. Like if we move that margin, we have regular events that shoot it up.
Yeah.
It's like that. It's exactly like the
Yeah.
paper talks about. We were in a state where all the beds were
full,
planned for usage. You know,
Yeah.
they may have not had a body in them.
Yeah.
Right? They may not have had a web request on them at the moment, but they had to be available for those web requests because they weren't all the same, right? And that's the thing that we had to figure out was like, okay, we made our little nurse, which was we created a little router, routing rules that would make sure that high priority stuff still gets done. Other things get chucked out the window because they're actually low value. And that becomes complex. And luckily that didn't break. But that's, to me, the definition of what this paper is talking about, of being in a solid state, is you are now in a place you've never been that hasn't broken. So now incidents from the past may give you a wrong idea. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. There's a sort of little box of key message takeaways at the end of the paper that I think is interesting to visit. So the first being the most important, according to Hirschhorn's law of systems, every system moves to the limit of its capability. Safety is a dynamic property of healthcare systems. Tight coupling in systems leads to unexpected failures that are hard to control. Healthcare systems can become saturated with work and become tightly coupled. The dynamics of high reliability systems are well understood and carefully managed. Shared, accurate, and precise knowledge of the dynamics and location of the current operating point and boundary locations is a necessary component of a safety culture. I'm going to say that again. Shared, accurate, and precise knowledge of the dynamics and location of the current operating point. So that's where we are in the map. And so everybody agreeing, here is where we are. This is where we're at. Do you agree? Do you agree? Do we know why that is true? Of the current operating point and boundary locations, when do we know you had an alert? You had an alert that said, at 80%, I'm going off. We're going to sort of move in that space. Is a necessary component of a safety culture. I like these. I like that, like, every system moves to the limit of its capability. So we are always, it's like entropy, right? It's just like we are pushing, we flirt with the boundary, as the late great Dr. Cook says.
I like that term, the flirting with the boundary, because that does feel like, and I liked how you described it. It's like the toddler coming in and just putting the toe over. Like,
Saul Richard, man. Saul Richard.
Oh, nothing happened. Nothing happened. Yeah, thank you, Dr.
We're good.
Cook.
There's no big deal.
Yeah, nothing happened. Look, see, Mom, I can come in here.
Yeah.
Just a foot.
I didn't get burned on the stove. My toe's over here.
I feel like that's those ambitious product managers are like, see, I told you. Like we could do 50 changes in a day, no problem. Like, what you just described resonates with me. It really felt like similar wording to the admonishment in the SRE book about getting agreement on SLOs, and it's often skipped. It's one of those things that has become almost too summary. It's like built into products. Here's an SLO. We have SLOs. Everybody has to have an SLO. But it's kind of like the old adage. I think this is Patton, or maybe it's Eisenhower, right? Plans are nothing. Planning is everything.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
This is the point, is if you don't have the kind of culture that says regularly, we're going to go and we're going to agree that this is where we're at, roughly, and this is where it would be bad, roughly. And is there anything directionally that might move that quickly toward that point happening right now, we should maybe pay
Talk
attention to
about it.
that. We should
Yeah.
talk about that. Like, and that's where like this new culture of ops review seems to be trying to help people have
Yeah.
forums for that.
Yeah.
Making SLOs as a forum for that. Like we are, I think our industry is figuring this out, but
Yeah.
not so
We
succinctly as the
100%.
paper.
I also like, I'm, I'm not going to say that I read all of this 8 times in the last week. I think I've read it a few times. How does this relate to resilience? I think is a thing that comes up in my head since we're on, ostensibly a resilience engineering podcast sometimes. You have sources of resilience that come into play at different at all of these operating points, right? You will always have sources of resilience, and leaning into those and understanding them is critical to how to manage work when going solid. I don't see the R word mentioned in this paper. It doesn't need to be, because I think it's describing actions and things and like leaning on these people and creating these roles and, kind of leaning on the people to get them out of it, you know? But that to me is where resilience fits into all of this, is that it is the verb that will help you get back across the other side, the right side of your margin. And it's present all the time. It's present whether you're in that margin, on the wrong side of it, on the right side of it. It's everywhere. It's all the time. And so it's worth understanding it in all the ways that you can, I think, at any time.
Yeah, I think one thing I've noticed about the papers that are focused on what I think it's safety science is what we'll call this paper, and what
Yeah.
Rasmussen is famous for,
Yeah.
safety science, is like you said, they don't talk about resilience, but they highlight examples where it's critical a lot of times, right? They talk about when pilots need to do things differently and have to adapt in the moment, and their experience starts to become valuable. They're talking about an anesthesiologist who understands that this is a critical moment. This is a scary time. There's really important stuff that's happening here, and I need to be on my game. That is, to me, the thing that we're trying to help our fellow practitioners in the software space understand that it is important to spend some time on, because we often get, it's called soft skills, right? You'll hear it called soft skills, right? I haven't heard that one as much anymore, actually, right? You'll get it, you'll see it downplayed often, like you need to ship, you got to deliver, all that stuff, right? But we all know, if you've been around long enough, that you won't be able to do any of that if you haven't done a little bit of this. And if you do just enough to get by, it's often not enough eventually. So to me, going solid is it's highlighting all this stuff where it's like resilience, and us talking about the paper and trying to put it in more people's heads.
Yeah.
And I've sent the paper to people at current job and past job before. Today I was rereading it and I went, and I went and found a thread from yesterday and pasted a quote. And I'm like,
it's like,
I pasted this. The likelihood of accidents depends on how far the operating point is from the boundary of unacceptable performance and how far and how quickly the operating point can move. People understood that because we were talking about the fact that the reason this monitor is annoying the crap out of us right now is because this can move fast.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
We're trying to build people's resilience and get them to go, it's okay to care about this. Like I know it's affecting me, but it needs to. And so, that's what we need to do, I think.
Cool.
That's my version of it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious about what our listeners think. And so this is what we're going to, this is also, the next part of this is also an experiment. So we just talked about a paper. It did come from a listener question. We tried to make it practical. I'm going to post an event. We're going to do a live conversation hosted. It's going to be a Resilience and Software Foundation event. So we will do it through there. So it's ticketed. If you're a non-member, you have to pay a little bit for a ticket. But if you are a member, you get a free ticket. We're going to do a paper discussion. If this is a popular thing to do, we might do some more of them. So we'll see how it goes. I'll post an event link at the end. You can always join the Resilience and Software Foundation at resilienceandsoftware.org. You can ask us a question by going to thisisfinepod.com.
Please do.
What did I forget, Clint?
I have a question, Colette.
Yeah.
In this session that we're planning, will people just be joining on the chat, or will they be on the video call with us?
Oh, no, it's like a live Zoom chat, and we'll record it.
It's like a webinar where they can be on it.
Yeah, it's just going to be like a paper talk.
Yeah.
Where you could talk to us, but we'll host. So we'll do the uncomfortable moderation part.
Yeah, come hang out with us.
But anybody, if you have thoughts, if you think this paper sucks, or if you think it's amazing and you have 8,000 examples to share with people to talk about, we would love to have you there.
Love the war stories. Please come share.
Yeah. Going solid. My last question. What is going solid? What is the version of going solid in the tech industry? Do we have our own slang? Or are we going to, because I was thinking it occurred to me, we call this podcast, This Is Fine, because This Is Fine is sort of going solid. The dumpster fire is our version.
Dumpster fire, I think, is probably the cleaner one. I was just going to play that's fucked. That's what I usually say, but dumpster fire has actually, yeah. This is fine is the answer to this is a dumpster fire, right? It's fine. Yeah, I think that.
I guess this is fine is the resilience. Is the resilience in the face of the dumpster fire?
Tire fire solid. Too. Yeah, dumpster fire, tire fire.
Agree, disagree? Okay. Yeah. Come talk to us later. We'll be back soon with another episode as well.
Share your dumpster fire with us.
Yes. All right, cool. Thanks, Clint. Thanks, everybody.
This is great. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.